All right. Well, hopefully, if you're here, that's because you're in Latin too, and you have already seen my general introduction about subjunctives, and you were ready to learn some real subjunctives. Yeah. Ready to see what they actually look like? I mean, I say hopefully, I mean, really, whether or not you're ready, you need to do this. So. But here's the weird thing is you might think we're going to start with present tense subjunctives in the way that we started with the present tense when we were learning our good old simple indicative verbs. We're actually not going to. And the reason is because the book that we read from starts with the imperfect and the pluperfect, which might feel weird, you know, right? Why not start with the present? But actually, I gotta say, this is one of the things I like the book on. Even though that's not the way I learned the subjunctive, because I learned from a different textbook than you guys, there actually are some real natural reasons for starting with the imperfect and pluperfect, and one has to do with some like grammatical function, like the context in which you use certain tenses. I'm not going to get into that here. That'll be something we can talk about in one of the later videos. But actually, of the subjunctive tenses, these two are actually probably the easiest two to learn, and the book teaches them at the same time. And for the reason that the book teaches them at the same time, well, again, there's two reasons, but for one of the reasons that the book teaches them at the same time, I'm going to teach them at the same time too. Also, I feel like my words are real muddy in there. Maybe I can just mud them up more. There we go. There's like a crap ton of misspeaks in there now. All right. So as an example, I'm going to use, I know I often use amo, but I'm going to use fleo today. It really is my favorite verb. It just sounds ever so pretty. And here's why doing the imperfect and pluperfect subjunctives is so easy. It's because you just use the infinitive. And I don't mean like in like the past, like when I told you about your indicative verbs, and I'd say, oh, the present system, it's based on the infinitive, and then I showed you how to start with the infinitive, cut some stuff off, and then add some more stuff on. No. For the imperfect subjunctive, you're not going to cut anything off. You're going to use the infinitive, all of it, the whole thing, which is what some of you guys have tried to do in the past when you're conjugating your verbs. You try to use flattery and then just stick endings at the end. And I'm like, no. You got to cut off the RE. Well, if it's subjunctive, you don't have to cut off the RE. So literally, the way you form the imperfect active subjunctive is you just take that infinitive, flattery, the whole thing, cut off nothing, and put personal endings at the end. And because of this, it also makes it real easy to identify in a sentence. You see what looks like an infinitive, but it also has an extra ending on it, well, then that just means it's an imperfect subjunctive. And here's the best part about it. I'm not going to show you different conjugations of this because you don't need to see anymore. They all do this. All of them. First conjugation, second conjugation, third, fourth, whatever the infinitive is, use that, and then stick a personal ending on the end. Even the irregulars do this, right? Like a verb like wolo, whose infinitive is wella, just stick endings on the end of wella. Or sumessa, the most irregular verb and most important verb. Take the essa, stick endings on it. You're done. It's really incredible how easy this is. All right, and if it's passive, then just stick a passive ending on it. Same deal. It's that simple. So there's really nothing terrible about this form. If you can recognize an infinitive and you already know your personal endings, that's as easy as the imperfect subjunctive is. So it's really, really not that bad. Now, the bigger question that people want to ask is, well, how do you translate it? And the answer is, in most contexts, just like you would have if it weren't subjunctive. Now, context does matter here, and that's something we're going to get to in different videos because, it depends on what kind of clause it is. So for that context, go watch videos as they exist on the different kinds of clauses. But in many instances, you're just going to translate this, in whatever person and number it is, as if it's imperfect. Simple as that, all right? Now, I did also say this would be about the pluperfect. Now, the pluperfect is slightly more complicated, only in as much as it's still based on an infinitive, which is cool and why it's so similar, but it's not based on the present infinitive, it's based on the perfect infinitive. If you make an imperfect subjunctive by adding endings to a present infinitive, then you do the same by adding endings to the perfect infinitive, and that's how you're going to get the pluperfect. But the perfect infinitives are not already part of our principal parts. We have to construct them, right? Which I also have a video on. If you didn't watch that, you should probably go and watch that. Or just do your best to deduce it from this. But nevertheless, once you know those perfect infinitives, you do the same thing. Now, it's also slightly more complicated because there's not one perfect infinitive, there's two. So the active and the passive don't look the same. But if you know your perfect forms pretty well, then you're used to that anyway. So for the pluperfect active subjunctive, you're going to take the perfect active infinitive and stick endings on it. So if you do know that perfect active infinitive already, that's all you need. And then you just take that form and add the same personal endings that we already know to it. If you're talking about pluperfect passives, well, then you take the perfect passive infinitive, right? Supine stem plus essa. And then you just stick personal endings on that too. But of course, you stick it on the essa because that's the part that conjugates. Just like if it were indicative, right? It's always the form of sum that conjugates, and then the form of the supine stem just has to change for active or passive, or the gender of the subject. You know, all that same junk that we learned about perfect passives before still applies here. All right, you're just using sm, ss, esset to make it a pluperfect subjunctive. And of course, when we learned pluperfect passive indicatives, we learned that we were using the imperfect of sum to make it pluperfect passive. Well, that's actually what we're doing here, right? Because SM on its own would be the imperfect subjunctive form of sum, and we're adding that here to make a pluperfect passive. So, yeah, that's what the pluperfect forms look like. I know, it seems like there should be more to this than that because, you know, especially from the introduction to subjunctives video, there's like kind of like a lot of big scary things and a lot of stuff that's gone unexplained. But as I promised in there, it's not the forms of the subjunctive that are hard, it's getting the context right. So there's your first two tenses of the subjunctive, and I'm going to finish this video off by giving you even better news. That's already half. I know you might be thinking, but there's 6 tenses in Latin. How is 2 half of 6? It's not, but there are not 6 tenses of the subjunctive. There's only 4. So that right there is already half your subjunctive tenses. I'm going to be coming back really, really soon with more information about the kinds of clauses that we're going to use those in. So check back for updates very, very quickly because they're going to be coming hard and fast throughout the whole month of April. Okay? But in the meantime, I'm going to go so I can get somewhere with better upload speeds and upload this. Bye.